Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and yes, I finally got my butt into gear and decided to do a nice Halloween special for you with Winifred Sanderson. So if you grew up like me in the mid-90s, you'll remember this film. It's Disney's Hocus Pocus, and the main character in it is of course the amazing Bette Milder, who plays Winifred Sanderson. It's an epic movie. I don't need to go on about it, but obviously with Halloween just around the corner, I decided to look for some clip art, which was this, and make my own version of Winifred. Okay, so I'm going to start off by using some of this perlite. It's like a soft orangey peachy type of color. I've also got my cheap threads from Amazon. I'm still using them up, guys. You know, never going to run out of these. I've got some black, just normal black cotton thread. Actually, I'm going to do the detail in, and then I've got my trusty overlock thread, which has definitely seen better days. It's kind of a little bit dingy and dirty right now, but you know what, we've got to use them, reuse, recycle, right? Okay, so I'm going to start off by drawing out a tracing of Bette. I've just copied over some of that clip art, and I'm then going to take a pair of scissors and just chop that out roughly. I'm then going to draw around this shape with my air soluble pen. I got these really cheaply off of eBay. I think they're about £3 for about 10 of them. And once I've done that, I'm just going to dot out some areas with the black pen so that it's not going to get dissolved in the air. And then I'm going to take that tracing, chop the head out so that it fits inside where the hair would be and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm going to need to trace around that again. So I'm going to use my air soluble pen for this. Now you do have to bear in mind that obviously because I'm tracing around the shape, this shape is going to be slightly bigger than the tracing, and obviously as that happens then everything has to change. So just put it in the back of your mind. You might want to just make this, when you do your actual stitching, ever so slightly smaller. And I'm just going to dot out some of the hair as well with this pen, just so I've got some guidelines of where I want my hair to stop. Winifred has quite crazy hair, so I'm not worried about, you know, it being perfect or anything. I just need somewhere to stop, like a marker. Just drawing in the collar now and the rest of the robe like so. And I'm just going to mark out where that neck is going to go as well. So let's just draw that chin in and draw that neck. I will probably chop the face out just to make doubly sure that's where it is, because I want this face to be as perfect as possible. But that looks okay for now. To be fair, she looks like she's got a bit more of a chin than I've given her, but we'll see. We'll see once we cut it all out and just adjust it. So now I'm just going to dot out some more permanent lines for the hair, so that I've got a definite marking point that's not going to keep vanishing over time. And I'm then going to come in with my air soluble pen and draw a couple of gradient lines. This is just going to tell me where all the different bullion knots that I'm planning are going to end. So I'm planning to go from light to dark, starting at the back. So I kind of need these lines just to tell me where everything's going to go. Okay, so I'm going to start off with some bullion knots. In the centre of the head, I've got a double strand with a knot at the bottom of this perlite peachy orange colour. And I'm going to start with my first bullion knot, come up, go down and come up again near the first entry point, and just wrap the thread around the needle. Now I'm going to do this quite raggedly. I want her hair to be quite messy, so I'm not really worried about perfection here and making perfect wraps. More, I want it to look kind of really busted and kind of a little bit messy and witchy and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to make an over the top long bullion knot, and I'm going to pull it through, fiddle around with it, and I'm going to pull it apart and see, get that little bit of a sense of thin and fat. And I'm then going to couch it into like an S type of shape. And this is really going to be the plan for all the subsequent bullion knots that come before it. Some of them I will loosen more because this one sort of tightened up on itself and I just couldn't, you know, I just thought, oh, it doesn't matter, I'll just do the next one. But I'm going to try and make them as sort of, you know, raggedy as possible. I don't know how else to say it. So you can see the second one going in here. Again, it's quite a not a very nice even wrap. It's starting to look quite messy and quite, you know, I mean, if you're perfection embroiderer, then really quite horrible to you. But I assure you the end result will be quite lovely. So you'll notice I'm also using some couching stitches over the top of these bullion knots just to make sure that they're keeping in their curly type of formation. Here is a great example of one that I can curl, so I'm just going to allow that curl over to happen, as you can see that's happening now, and just couch it into place. So we've got almost like a ringlet that begins to happen, and that's just where I've done an extra long bullion with way too many wraps, and then I've got a lot of extra thread that I can then use and maneuver and manipulate. Okay, so here you can see the last bullion going in on the foundation level of the hair. So this is the first layer, which I want to be lighter because it will be in the back. I'm then going to repeat that process with some orange thread. This isn't doubled over, this is just a single strand. And again, I'm just going to come up, go down and come up, and then start to wrap. You'll notice with these bullions, because I want them to be quite mucky and messy, I'm not actually keeping my needle in the fabric, but I'm bringing it almost all the way out. And this also enables me to get a really nice extra long bullion. This is not perfection, so it's kind of, I suppose for me it's a really good exercise in just seeing what the stitch is capable of as well. So you will have a lot of wriggling, a lot of playing around just to get the wraps down, but you can really create really nice textures with this knot when you play with it like this. And again, once I'm ready, I'm just going to couch those bullions into S and curly types of shapes all on top of one another, so they almost look like little worms. Okay, any gaps that you can see between the bullion knots, I'm just going to plug up with some chunky French knots, going around the needle around 3 or 4 times. I'm also going to do a couple of back stitches just to secure these French knots in place, because sometimes you can knock them about and they can come loose. And I'm going to do some French knots and some finer bullion knots around the front of the hairline. I'm going to avoid the widow's peak and the very tip of the hairline. I still want that black line sort of visible, so I'm going to make sure that none of my thread work goes past that whatsoever. You'll see here I'm loosening up the bullion knots as well and just making them look extra messy towards the front. Going to add another French knot here, but always behind that black line. I'm still trying to make sure that I can see that black line as much as possible. Now I'm going to go where the widow's peak is and just do some straight stitches just so that I can highlight this area. It's actually quite a important part, I'd say, of Winifred's character, that she has this widow's peak. I looked at a lot of clip art and every single one, the widow's peak was extremely important. So I'm just going to make sure that I am not hiding that and it doesn't get lost in the mass of French knots by using some straight stitch. And you can see, because I'm going through some of these chunky French knots and bullion knots, it's a little bit difficult to get through. So I'm just going to persevere and just give it a good, nice hard tug. And once I've finished that, I'm of course going to just finish plugging up any areas on this side with some French knots and some bullion knots as needed. So I'm pretty much happy with that. So I'm now going to switch to a single strand of black cotton. And with a beading needle, so I've got a lot of control over my thread, I'm going to start to outline this face. Now, I was right in the first instance. I did need to elongate her face slightly, so I just cut the neck off the tracing and went back in. I'm not too worried about these air-soluble pen marks showing. As we go through the embroidery, they will begin to lessen and dissolve with time. So you can see me here just outlining the ear. I'm going to use the base of this fabric, which is already quite a fawny type of colour for her skin tone. So I wanted to really, for this one, create areas of 3D and then actually have the face more or less flat. So I'm going to outline all the way around the face and the neck, but I'm going to leave the collar of her robe because I want to use a woven picot for this. So I'm just going to carry on until I have outlined everything with the face and the neck in black, and then I'm going to start on the facial features. For me, heads and faces, expressions are really important. So I am going to actually come back in with the tracing and chop these eyes out. And I'll probably chop the mouth out as well and areas of the nose, just to make sure that I have everything in exactly the right place. It's really funny, but even a couple of millimeters off and this will not look like Winifred at all. So we really want to make sure that all those features, all those key features are in the exact right place. So now that I've done that, I'm just going to line that up again and make sure that it's in exactly the right place, and then I'm going to go ahead and use my black pen to outline this. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and add some finer detail. So you can see I've already taken the black pen and drawn on some of my facial features. These are roughly, doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because I am going to stitch over them. I'm actually using a white cotton thread now, double strand. So this is just my normal overlocker thread that I showed you earlier on. And I'm just going to do some straight stitches vertically just to cover this whole eye space. Now this is really useful if you want to make the eyes ever so slightly bigger. Like I said, the tracing is always going to distort the size ever so slightly, so I'm actually going to make these just slightly bigger than I originally did with my black lines. So once I've done one, I'm just going to carry on that same idea over to the other. And then I can go in and add some more detail on the mouth with my white teeth. So exactly the same idea again. And now I'm coming back in with that single strand of black thread, and I'm just going to outline all of the details in exactly the same way that I did before. Just being really careful and mindful that I want nice curvature on my eyes. Just going to take my time and outline the whole of the face. So I'm just going to refer back to the tracing for the pupil and iris placement. I'm going to use my black pen. Now this is probably the riskiest bit, but I can always go back in with a white thread if I make any kind of serious mistake. I'm just going to dot out roughly where the pupils are according to the tracing. And then I'm going to come in again with this single strand of black thread, and I'm just going to outline the eyes, making sure that I've got a nice curvature. So I'm going to go ahead and black out the whole of the eye, and then I'm going to take my white thread again, double strand, and I'm going to create a small French knot where I want that light reflection to be. I'm actually going to place a second stitch in that French knot just to make sure that it's couched in the right place, and then I'm going to repeat that over on Winnie's second eye. I'm fairly happy with those. I'm just going to put another couching stitch here just to make sure that the French knot stays in place. I'll probably do a bit more work on them, but overall I don't think they're going to get much better than that. I'm just going to fill out a little area here where I can add a bit of extra white in the eye, And the other pupil on the opposite eye, I'll probably make ever so slightly smaller, the white light reflection, I think. But other than that, pretty happy. Now I'm going to take a single strand of bright red floss and I'm just going to go ahead and fill out her lips, again using the same straight stitch, just nice and close together, just making sure that I fill in the space and it looks nice and even. And once that's done, I'm going to take that same black thread and I'm just going to outline everything just so that I can bring the detail, the idea of the detail back in again. I'm just going to take a brown single strand floss now and I'm just going to add a little bit of an idea of an iris, just a brown one, ever so slightly, and that's just to add a little bit of a tiny detail. And to be honest, you almost don't even see it, but I kind of was just looking at her eyes and feeling like, no, it needs something else. So I'm just going to put a little bit of brown here and just brighten up the eyes. I'm also going to come along with this black pen and just re-add in any black lines around her hairline. Now, I'm not going to do this with any thread. I think the black pen is probably enough here, just because I don't want to definitely add it. I kind of almost just want a sense of her hairline back again. Now, I actually went ahead and got some rouge that I had in my makeup bag, and just started to add some blush to her cheeks, her chin and her forehead. She actually has these really over the top rosy cheeks in the film, and I don't really want to do them with embroidery because I feel like it's going to be a bit too much. So I'm just adding that little bit of ruddiness to her complexion with some makeup. Okay, so now I'm just going to use my air soluble pen again and just outline the cape and the collar here in preparation for my woven picot. Okay, so I'm going to start with the bottom part of the cape and I'm going to use a pin, and I'm going to start probably around about 1 centimetre away from the original drawing and just put my pins in. I've already come up with a whole strand of this lovely dark green floss. She's always wearing green in the film, so I went with this bottle green. I'm going to use 4 pins, but I will need a 5th pin at some point because obviously woven picot does need an odd number rather than an even. I'm then going to slip that thread underneath all of the pin heads and come back down like you can see here. And I'm then going to come back up in line with the 2nd pin that you can see right here. And I'm going to go around this pin head, but I'm going to add a little loop here, like a buttonhole stitch, just to secure it. I'm going to go under that pin head and under the 3rd pin head. And then I'm going to add another loop just to make sure that it's doubly secure. And bring that floss down, and then again I'm going to need a final point, an anchor point. So I'm just going to go ahead and loop this thread in the middle of pins 2 and 3 right here, and then I'm going to need to add another pin as well. So I'm just going to make sure that this is a buttonhole stitch like so, and then I'm going to pull it nice and tightly backwards. Okay, so the 5th pin is going in, and I'm going to take that thread around the top of that pin head right there, and I can begin weaving. So if you guys have ever watched any of my other videos, you'll know that I do all kinds of weird and wonderful woven picots. I've kind of made it my own stitch now with all the different kinds of patterns that I'm able to achieve with it. This one, I'm going to actually make it really messy. I'm not too worried about gaps that much because I think her cape will kind of look good, a little bit holey and a little bit flowy. So I'm just going to weave in an up and over motion. So that means going over one strand, under another, over one strand and then under another. And this is why we needed obviously an odd number, because you need to be able to have a different weave on the way forward to backwards. And I'm just going to weave until I fill up that whole space. Remove the pins. This is probably the best bit of a woven picot, I think. And then I'm going to scrunch it up and just manipulate it so I have a sense of a more 3D shape. Once I'm happy with the scrunching, I'm just going to come up with that same thread and just put some couching stitches in places where I want to maintain that volume. So the second woven picot is going to go in for the collar area. I'm only going to use 3 pins and I'm going to use them at this angle. I want the attachment obviously to start at the neck, and then I can make the manoeuvrements, you know, on the other end, if that makes sense. I think it will make sense once the woven picot is finished. So you can see the 3 pins going in there, and I'm going to start at the neckline like so. I'm using a slightly lighter green. And I'm going to go up underneath all of the pin heads and then back down where the neck is, filling in that collar shape. And because it's only 3 pins, I don't really need any buttonhole stitch here. I can just go around that central pin and then I can begin my weave. Okay, so we've done. I can take these pins out. And now you can see I've got great manoeuvrability for her collar. So I'm just going to squish it all into shape, add a little bit of volume, and then again I'm going to just couch this into position. And what you do on one side you must do on the other. So I'm going to create the rest of the cape in exactly the same way. And once I've done that, I'm going to add a really nice finishing touch with a bow. So I'm going to use that same green that I did for the collar, and just in between the 2 sides of the cape, I'm just going to create 1 loop, hold it in place with my finger, come over to the other side. Be careful not to pull it too tightly. I'm going to create another loop, hold it, make sure they're both roughly about even. And then just 1 single straight stitch. If I can come up, yep, I can. 1 single straight stitch. Carefully. Boom! Oh my god, I love it. Okay, so I think this one is pretty much done. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below. I kind of like her actually. I think I got her just enough. It's not perfect, definitely things I could improve, but yeah, I kind of like it. I am a massive fan of this film, so this is definitely one that I enjoyed it a lot. Let me know what you think, comment, like, subscribe below. I promise I won't stay away too long again.